Hi, I'm Kevin DDR, and this is my submission for SGDQ 2018 of the game Spindizzy Worlds for a race with Aperture Grills, TBCR, and Prism. Without much further ado, let's just get started on the run here, and I'll talk about the game as we go. Alright, so Spindizzy Worlds is kind of somewhere of a cross between Super Monkey Ball and Marble Madness. It's a pretty simple game. You've got a spinning top. You've got isometric controls using the SNES D-pad. You've also got a stop button, which lets you immediately stop, or if you hold it, move very slowly. And a accelerate button, which accelerates you at twice normal speed. So throughout this run, you're going to see some pretty heavy use of both of those buttons. Just to move around the stages quickly. You're also going to see a lot of both intended and unintended skips. So here at the end of this stage, stages usually involve either just reaching the end of the stage as fast as possible, or collecting a bunch of things on the stage and then reaching the end. There seems to be kind of no rhyme or reason as to why some stages are one way and some are the other, but so it goes. Alright, so bonus stage here is pretty simple. It's just, you know, a nice kind of optimized route. Nice little missed D-pad press there, causing me to fly off the stage twice. But I promise the rest of the run makes up for it. Now, unfortunately, oh, right, okay, sorry. We do not go to Pact Attack second in this run. We go to Buxton Cat, which is a great stage. It's supposed to be quite long, but we just kind of skipped the entire stage using this technique here. I got a little too aggressive with the jump there and ended up destroying my top. This bonus stage is just kind of nice. Some bonus stages, there's nothing you can do but just wait for them to time out. Some of them you can finish by picking everything up, which is the fastest way to beat them. So we're moving on to Grasshopper here, which is a pretty cool level. I like it. It's got some nice little movement here at the start. And the controls for this game are pretty interesting too. The isometric controls are lined up so that, you know, if you push up on the D-pad, you move up and right on screen. They're kind of aligned with the grid, which is a little unintuitive at first, but it actually makes the game much easier to play because that's the kind of motion that you're going to be wanting to be making a lot. So here you got to line up at the bottom of that tile to get that little jump there. Quite tricky. We'll be picking up the remaining gems. I missed the elevator there through pretty poor play. And this run uses some techniques that were literally discovered today. So it's a little sloppy, but the time save ended up being quite significant due to the new techniques. So, all right. We just stop here. This little box at the end is kind of tricky because you can actually end up breaking the top, Gerald. Oh yes, also the top is named Gerald because reasons. You can end up breaking him if you fall too far. So the stage is kind of nice. A little bit of... Now we're going to see our first toggle switches in this stage. Toggle switches play a big role in the later stages in this game. They can do all sorts of various things, such as start lifts moving, make things appear, all sorts of wacky and wild stuff. Here I want to line myself up at the very bottom of that block because I need to be at the very back there to skip over here, which I successfully did. Now this screen is nice. Aperture, I believe, maybe it was TBCR, found a really good way to play this. You're supposed to kind of go around in a spiral around this stage, but you can actually just cut out, and I missed it there due to some pretty poor movement. You can just kind of skip most of it by moving fast enough, which is what I do there. Now this bonus level, you can just fall off and finish the stage. Alright, now unfortunately this is the stage I was talking about earlier, Pact Attack. It's without a doubt by far the worst stage in the game. The game runs at what might as well be 1 frame per second during it. And Spindizzy does not drop frames in order to keep the game simulation running at full speed. If it slows down, the game just slows down. Which means that lag manipulation in a couple places in the game is quite important. There's a couple stages where we'll kind of run into enemies to kill them. Not because we need to, but because it'll make the rest of the stage run at a higher frame rate. The stage is obviously, you know, based on Pac-Man. It's just a maze with a route that you have to go and pick everything up in. The first screen of it is really quite dire. There's another screen that has extremely bad frame rate. But other than this stage, the game is really, really great. And even this stage has some interesting techniques as well, so more on that when we get to them. You can see I did a little bounce there off the wall. Sometimes that's quite useful in keeping your momentum in this game. Really can let you kind of move around the maps a lot faster. Like right here. It's actually significantly faster to just bounce off the wall. Now, these little tight, one-wide block corridors are really awful because it looks like you can just move freely through them, but that's really just a trick of the perspective, and actually you have to be lined up pretty much perfectly to even get through them, which proves to be quite annoying in this stage. If you ever see me just kind of ram into a corner over and over, it's because I was lined up incorrectly. And, you know, usually there's maybe a 2 or 3 pixel gap in which you can be lined up in order to get through any of these maze sections. So this is the extremely dire frame rate section I was talking about. Regrettably, there's nothing we can do here to make it faster, or at least nothing we found so far. I got a nice little skip here too. Just set yourself up back here, go at full speed, and launch yourself into the middle of the maze. You'll see these kind of one-tile skips happen actually quite a few times in the game. In addition to just being nice movement, they actually, in some places, will let you bypass huge chunks of the game. It's interesting, too, because when we first started playing this game, there were a lot of puzzle screens that are just kind of not well designed or fun. But as it turns out, we found out that you can skip almost all of them. So the remaining parts of the game are really quite great. This screen is not too bad. There's a nice little one-tile skip that you'll see towards the end. This is a good route here too. It's quite simple execution-wise, so right here we just skip into an inner part of the maze. And unfortunately, I actually skipped again out. It's very hard to stop yourself at exactly the right point when you're moving that fast. I mean, the execution cap of this game is absolutely insane. We've been messing around in tasks and have done some crazy stuff that, you know, may very well be achievable by humans in the future. Okay, Sandy Island. Now, this is a much more generate, healthy stage. I really like this stage. At the very start, there's a really tight jump there that is quite tricky. Here, you wait 4.5 cycles of those gray platforms. 4, and go. And that lines you up nicely with that bumping platform. Now, here, you can kind of get as aggressive as you want. You know, kind of choose your own difficulty type thing, where the question is, do you try and diagonally maneuver through this maze, or do you just do the safe, you know, cardinal directions movement? And I tried to get quite aggressive with it, and it worked well. Here, you've got to be running at just the right speed to avoid getting caught by those tiles, which doesn't always kill you, but it definitely slows you down no matter what. And another bonus level that we can just fall off of. Rollerama. Now, I think the intended route on this stage is to go down this blue maze, which is quite boring and actually hard to maneuver through just because of the angles. and the perspective. This is much easier, so we just do this. That was a sort of weird, freaky Gerald break there. Happens occasionally. Alright, now this is just the fastest way through this. You don't have to pick up any of these gems, so we're basically just getting to the end as quickly as possible. Now, again, this is sort of another choose your own adventure section, where you can choose to either take the safe path on the, flat ground, or you can wildly cut corners. In this run, I felt it was going pretty decently at this point, so I just decided to play it safe. But you could do something really insane in IL if you wanted to. And here we've got a great donation reading break. This is a bonus level that you have to time out. One technique that we've started using lately that I figured out was that if a bonus stage doesn't run at 60 FPS, you lose time because the timer counts down more slowly. So in some stages, you need to start picking things up, even if you can't complete the stage that way, just to make the game run at 60 FPS and have the timer count down quickly. All right, Oily Way. Now we're really getting into the kind of wild, skippy zone. So, missed that jump. It's, again, quite tricky with the perspective, and especially if you're trying to rush it. Here you've got to be lined up pixel perfect in the middle of that. The reason why is because I gain enough speed there to jump the gap and then break Gerald on the frame he lands on the ground, which causes him to collect the gem and get warped back to the last place. There's another little skip there too. Causes him to get warped back to the last place that he really touched solid ground. So just a nice quick way to cut out a big old chunk of the stage. Now this screen is, it looks bad, but it's really not. Here we can skip a good portion of the stage by just kind of lining ourselves up reasonably well here, hitting that switch, which bumps us over onto the railing there to skip traversing a big portion of the stage. And in some places too, you'll see me fall off after missing a jump. The reason why is often just to line myself back up nicely with the grid. In some cases it's unintentional, but many it's just the easiest way to line yourself back up. So this section is kind of tricky. The goal is to traverse the stage, reach a blue switch which activates the exit, and then make it back to the start without touching any other switch. These little gaps are brutal. There's very, very tight accuracy. I mean, really, this game is ridiculously hard. But some of those jumps are extremely difficult to pull off consistently. Luckily, you can just kind of try a few times without too much time loss. Sort of modulate your velocity a little. Alright, now we've got a huge full stage skip here. Just line yourself up well at that corner. This is, again, quite tricky, but even if you miss it a couple times, it still massively saves you time on the run. Now that is a trick that I kind of try it in a wild way that I discovered that works maybe 1 in 5 or less tries. But I decided to go for it on that run because, again, even trying it 3 or 4 times saves you time over the other strategy. The other strategy being to change your camera angle and then line yourself up carefully. So, Obelisk Run. Cool stage. I have a little strat that I came up with here that, where again, much like you'll see, in some other stages where you break onto the ground in order to pick something up and then kind of death warp back. I do that here with varied success, but when pulled off correctly, saves quite a bit of time. Here, again, another switch puzzle. I want to activate the second switch right when that touches the ground so that they overlap, which is how I kind of get jumped up here, as you'll see. Now here, this is very tricky. You want to set the 2 platforms up so that Gerald doesn't break when falling from one to the other. There's not much room for error. Now, this puzzle solution is a little interesting here. We want to run over that right as the black jumping block hits the ground. And you can see it kind of went slightly wrong there. So I try it again. And we jump over the other activated switch so that we can run to the exit. And this is another painful frame rate screen. It's not too bad because it's quite a brief stage, but really any stage with lots of enemies suffers quite heavily as a result of kind of overloading the system. All right. Now, this stage makes quite heavy use of the skips that we talked about earlier, the one-tile skips. This one right here is quite tricky to pull off. You really have minimal room. You need to be at the very back of that tile in order for it to work. These later ones are really easy because you just have tons of room to build speed. Run over some Amiga balls there. This game is a port of a Amiga game. It also had a couple other kind of archaic home computer ports as well. X68000, I think an Atari ST port maybe, PC-98 for Japan. The SNES version though is by far the most accessible, and it runs decently, so that's what we play. Now Grass Maze, we can just skip pretty much all of that stage. Just like that. This is just the most optimal route throughout the maze here. Again, it's very important to play the start of the maze quickly because based on the paths that the enemies take, if you don't play the start quickly, you end up with an even worse frame rate due to enemies being in the vicinity of, where you are. So luckily, well, not luckily, skillfully, I traversed the maze quite quickly there. Now this bonus stage, we actually very recently discovered that it has the potential to be faster to play out this bonus stage and then play the stage that comes after it if you can finish it extremely quickly. But at most it saves maybe half a second over just letting the stage time out. So in the interest of consistency here, I just let it time out. And again, I had to make sure I sit in a 60 FPS zone. Misdirection. This is one of TBCR's least favorite levels, but I don't mind it too much. It's got some fun movement. It's really, overall, pretty neat. These diagonals are very tricky to traverse. So we need to pick up everything here. I tried to rush things there just to save a couple seconds and was unsuccessful. Tried kind of a one-shot attempt at a skip there that, well, gets you out of doing all of this, which is just pretty much impossible to maneuver. But if you don't set up the skip, if the skip doesn't work on the first try, it's not worth trying again, so I didn't. Alright, now we've got just some insane movement here. That's a bit of a mess. Alright, so the stage is comprised of, 4 sub-stages that you access by touching these flags. There's no real best order to do them in. They're all roughly equidistant. This is quite tricky. You have to fling yourself across the ice at just the right angle. There's a ton of the rest of the stage that you're supposed to do, but we just skip it all with a very tightly timed abuse of the B button and holding backwards to just round that corner and then accelerate through. Because you're not really supposed to be able to control yourself on the ice, but if you're moving slowly enough, you can. And it turns out that it just works out nicely there. Alright, now this stage is a silly switch puzzle. You need to not hit those yellow or orange switches. You want to hit the red switch there. Okay, this is working. So basically, you need to not deactivate the exit after you get upstairs. So if I hit any other switch now, that elevator will deactivate itself, which would suck. So okay, and now we're on to the last of the flag puzzles. This puzzle is aggravating. There's a couple different ways you can approach it. I believe I went for the really aggressive one in this run and biffed it twice. Yes, I did. And again, it's kind of a non-issue because even attempting it a couple times is faster than not, so. All right, and now with all 4 sections of the puzzle done, we return with a nice little skip there. You have to be going as fast as possible there in order to not break Gerald. This bonus stage, you could time out, but why would you do that when you can complete it? Just jump through the warp here, don't need to pick anything up. And that's misdirection. Okay, Phrygia. This stage is pretty easy. I think I went for, no, I didn't. Okay. You can actually skip both platforms on the way down to the bottom here, but it's not really faster than not doing it, and it's quite risky, so. All right, another insane skip here, just right over most of the stage there, which is very nice. Which is good too, because the part that we skip is kind of a bummer, so. All right, just a little bit diagonal movement there. Again, another section where you can choose to play it safe or be really aggressive. Like that was a really tight movement there to save just a couple, stop and turns. Now here we just skip the entire stage because we can. So we just activate the last of the platforms and then rush back over to it before it starts raising up too high for us to get on it. Get on it, transfer over to the exit area, and exit. Now, this is a bonus level where what I was talking about earlier applies, which is the bonus stage doesn't run at 60 FPS unless you pick up the gems, in which case the game doesn't have to draw anything, so it runs much faster. So I just pick them all up and then go back to the center. And this saves what I believe to be about 20 seconds RTA. So it's quite good. All right. Tower City. Tower City is a tricky stage. A lot of time can be gained or lost in this stage. The skips are not too brutal. So I'll intentionally fall off there because it lines you up extremely well for this skip, which lets you... There's a whole subsection through that warp. The idea of picking up that gem up there is that you have to go through a subsection, and then when you warp back to the main stage, you land on that platform. So we can just skip playing that entire part of the game by kind of lining ourselves up well there. And, like I said earlier, trying the skip and failing it a couple times is actually still like over a minute faster than not, so. All right, this section is not too bad. It's got a little kind of frustrating blind turns into the abyss, like there, for instance. But it's okay. We don't have to pick anything up here. All right. So now just line myself up here. Somehow missed the jump. Interesting. And now we go into the final section of this stage, which is a annoying switch puzzle. The reason why it's annoying is because from this perspective, you actually can't see these elevators that are supposed to take you throughout the stage. I didn't miss a cycle there. That's just, you have to wait because it starts in a position where you can't jump onto the elevator. Alright, and then we have another one here. And making it through these corners is a bit of a nightmare, but experienced players just kind of get used to it. So you can see Gerald popped up onto that elevator there, which is a nice way to confirm that you actually made it. We don't have to pick anything up here again. We just have to get to the exit, which I activate switches to do. So there's that green switch, which activates the green elevator, and that's very tight timing to make that elevator cycle. Luckily I did it. So I build up speed here, kind of skip over that platform, and land on the exit. And now if you land on an exit, in some cases, Gerald won't break due to the way the game's physics work. So it's okay to fall from kind of whatever distance or height onto the exit, as long as you actually fall onto the exit. All right, here I wanted to try and line up the elevator cycles. That's kind of a new strategy we've come up with. Those two switches that I activated start those elevators moving, and the way that you would do it as fast as possible is actually not optimal because you have to wait for the elevators to kind of synchronize their cycles. So I tried to do something better there and unfortunately failed. All right, here, a little bit of random luck. Probably the only truly random part of the game there. You just have to hope that the blue elevator is bouncing fast enough. Now here's some blind platforming, which is infuriating. I nailed it on my first try there. We've got to pick up these gems. Again, that's all just to avoid a camera angle change, which, you know, each one makes the game pause for about 5 seconds. So we just don't do them. And it works out nicely. Now these jumps are really tricky. We have good setups for them now, involving use or non-use of A and, you know, positioning. So it's not too bad, but when they go wrong, it can be quite frustrating. I got really aggressive with that one there too, so I'm glad it worked out. And that's Castle Quest over. Emedia. Alright, Emedia is by far the least reliable part of this game. It's the only skip which is truly awful. It takes most experienced players maybe 5 or 6 tries on average to get the skip, but it skips multiple screens and saves like a few minutes off the run. So even 5 or 6 or 7 or even 10 attempts of this skip still saves you a good chunk of time. So for marathon consistency, it is still best to do this unreliable skip. Luckily, I nailed it in about 4 or 5 tries. Unfortunately, there's not really a nice consistent setup because you just have to be moving fast when you do it. So it is what it is. Now this stage is all about going up and down the floors of a pyramid and collecting gems. We have a pretty nice route to collect them all as fast as possible. So I fell off there, but it actually doesn't matter because you have to wait for those yellow platforms to lower so that you can pass through them. Here we also have to wait for the yellow platforms to raise. And it really takes a while. So that one has to be fully up too, because otherwise you can't traverse through like that. And just a nice little corner cut there. Skips a nice big chunk of the stage too. Alright, now we are back at the start of this pyramid section. We need to go and take a different path now. We'll go through here, but we won't take the next warp. Instead, we'll go around the corner. And now we've picked everything up, so it's time to go to the exit. Of course, we have to wait a bit. It's very critical to not fall off this level right there, because if you do, you lose like 40 seconds having to make it all the way back to that spot. And picking up all the gems activated that jumper platform, which sends us out the exit and onto the top of the pyramid to pick up the last gem. Then we enter here and we're done. And this bonus level we can just skip as well. Ball Race is next. Ball Race is a really great level. I like it. I mean, it's truly just a throwback to Marble Madness. Pretty simple, just kind of movement only level. Really doesn't take very long. Don't have to pick anything up, just have to move quickly. There's one little small skip. I forget if I attempt it in this run. It requires diagonal movement, and diagonal movement is probably the least reliable thing in this game. It's the most, aggravating. So, I'm not sure if I try it here. Ah, I did. Okay. And then promptly proceeded to fall off the stage. So. All right. This is the end of Ball Race. I tried to get really aggressive with full speed movement there and suffered greatly as a result. All right, now Waterworld has a hidden exit. You're moving on these invisible platforms, and you go left there instead of right, and it just cuts out a nice chunk of the stage. This section, we do have to pick up all the gems. Which is unfortunate. But this is the most optimized route with which to do that. And we just go across the ice here and finish the stage. Now, this is another bonus stage that doesn't run at 60 FPS. So again, we pick up some items. I'm still working on the best order for picking up these items in order to cause the game to not slow down. This is so far what I've found to work best. So now you can see the game is running back at 60 FPS. And the timer ticks down very quickly as a result. All right, Canalside. This is a healthy stage. It's pretty fun to play. Nice for ILs. All right, so we only care about one switch on this stage, and it's that one. So now we're gonna go right back here, traverse the corner of this, do this little blind turn in here, and place ourselves underneath the yellow elevator. Pick up the flags, and then drop in that hole, which teleports us to the next stage. So we go to the third screen here. There's nice little skip right here. It's quite tricky because if you land on the blue area, it's actually too far of a fall and Gerald ends up breaking. Here we're just stuck waiting on that black block to extremely slowly rise so we can fall into the exit. Now this bonus level is possible to finish by picking everything up. It's very difficult to finish with more than like maybe 5 real-time seconds on the clock, if even. So if you make pretty much one mistake, it's over and you just have to wait it out. But you like I said, only lose maybe 5 seconds tops. So, not a run ender by any means. At that point, I was just waiting it out. Alright, we're kind of coming into the back stretch of the game here. You'll see I selected Spindizzy there, but you can't actually enter it until you've finished all the other stages. So, Arrow Maze is up next. And, it's a pretty decent stage. Don't mind it. Don't mind it too much anyway. Just kind of run along the railings here. Pick up all the gems. There's a nice little skip at the end too. I forget if I try it in this run. Okay, I definitely didn't. And I knew this run was almost on pace to be a world record, actually. So I started getting pretty nervous. I made some pretty major mistakes at this point, which cost me a good couple minutes. Again, we're just picking up the flags here. Now that just kind of happens sometimes, and it sucks. There's not really much you can do about it. At least not until we reverse the engineer the game further to find out why that happens. And there's the exit. We've got one more screen, and this one you actually don't have to pick up the gems. Inexplicably, just guess they didn't feel like coding it. Alright, we kind of abuse the zip arrows there to make it quickly to the exit. And we're done. So we fall off the platform and everything is great. Alright, Waterworks. This stage has had some hot new speed tech lately. There are 3 sub-stages that you're supposed to play and then pick up the gem after. Luckily, we just skip one of them like that. All 3 actually can be skipped, but the third one is really quite difficult to skip, and the stage is not that long. So, you know, for consistency's sake, definitely an RTA. Like in a marathon, I probably wouldn't attempt it unless a better setup is found. I managed to get the second skip there in kind of an unorthodox way, but it worked out, so I'm not complaining. And we'll play the third one here. This stage would be awful if you had to play it out kind of using a slow intended route, but luckily we can jump from these 2 sort of tiers of platforms to each other by moving really quickly and then falling onto the slope. So that's what I do. It's also easy if you go too fast to cause Gerald to break when you fall down any of these slopes. So again, it's kind of a risk-reward thing of how aggressively do you want to try and take the lines. So picking everything up, we take the warp, and we're back. And there it is. This bonus level again, we can just fall off. Tripath. This is another stage that has 3 warps, hence the name Tripath. That we're supposed to play, you know, we pick up these gems and fall into warps that take us to other parts of the stage. But if you line yourself up just right, you can actually pick up the gem without falling into the warp. This third one you can do, but it's really, really difficult, very inconsistent, and it's just not worth doing because the setup for it probably takes longer than just playing the stage out legitimately. So we just play it out. It's pretty basic. And then we exit the stage. And that's that. And it's another bonus level we can fall off of, so we do. Alright, closing in on the back of the game, Rad Zima. Oh, wait, no, not Rad Zima, it's Radima. The stage is not too hard. It's kind of nice to play at the end of the game. You know, you're kind of down to the really brutal stages like torture. So this is a pleasant change of pace. Now here we just have another Pact Attack style maze. There's not really a great way to play this other than what I'm doing, which is just take the smallest path possible through the dots. There's no like advanced techniques, you just have to play it. So it all comes down to good movement and not getting stuck at the corners. Like that. Don't do that. So I kind of knew this run might have a chance at this point. Which scared me pretty badly. Here's just another pick up all the dots stage. And that was just poor movement there. And if you fall off the platform, you're kind of hosed. You either need to fall out the holes in the ice, or just get yourself trapped on the ice so that you self-destruct. And we'll be doing one of those block skips again here. The one tile skips right there. Just to cut out traversing back through the level. Now this is pretty silly. Inexplicably, they put what appears to be a timed bonus stage in the middle of the stage. You can collect everything on it, and it doesn't finish. So essentially we're just looking for a 60 FPS zone here. So we have another kind of minute or so for donations. So I just stay there for a while, and it works nicely. And you might think that that's the end of the stage, but no, it's not. There's actually another section after it. The stage was a bit of a nightmare for a while. It's just kind of slow and not really a lot you can do to speed it up. But I discovered a pretty neat technique to just skip a lot of it, which involves using the one tile skip technique that we use many times throughout the game. The reason why we didn't find it earlier is because it turns out that actually you don't want to do this from as far back as possible, because that causes Gerald to jump into the air a bit and not have traction with the ground on the flat surface to gain more speed. And again, I mean, like, even missing this like 4 or 5 times or more is actually faster than playing the other way, so I did it. We hope to find a consistent setup for that soon. Bonus level, just fall off. Now we've got 2 worlds left. Torture and Spindizzy. Torture is, much as it implies, pretty torturous. Luckily, we don't have to play the worst part of this stage. If you just go to the warp into the next section of the stage, you have to play a really awful kind of warp maze that just is awful and gross and bad. So what we do instead is pick up all the gems, which takes you to a bonus stage instead that skips that stage. And then instead of playing out the bonus stage, we just go immediately to the exit. Which is what I do here. So that takes us to this screen, which is brutal. I did it quite well on this run. It can go wrong in lots of ways. So there you'll see I broke Gerald onto a gem just to avoid having to go back and pick it up later. Here we do a little bit of a angled jump down onto this platform just to avoid backtracking. Go upstairs here. Pick up the gem. Do a little skip there to avoid backtracking again. And the jump as intended. And we're right at the exit. Now, this screen is it's troublesome. That went really well there. You jump over here, and then we have to get back over to the other side of the stage. So I'm gonna go back up onto this wood platform. Line myself up really nicely with this bridge here. And I'll break when I land on it, but because I touch down on the grass, it'll put me nicely lined up with it again. We have to do this little jumping maze part. It's actually very easy, just kind of looks rough. Now this is really tricky. You want to be above that bridge, but you can't just like go directly up. You have to sort of run yourself at an angle to get up the hill. And due to the perspective, it's tough, but there is a fairly consistent way to set it up. And worst case, you lose a few seconds. So this completion of Spindizzy was pretty nice. I came in at 45-47, and you know, the run ends at like 52-12, so it wasn't bad. It was honestly quite good. Spindizzy is, of course, the final world in the game. It's meant to be a huge kind of puzzle marathon with lots of sub-levels and all sorts of junk. And we just skipped most of them. Unfortunately, these first 4 we can't skip at all. So the idea here is you'll play the sub-level and then activate these switches. And you want to hit the switches in a certain order so that all 4 of them are activated or deactivated as necessary. So we just play out the sub-stages in the order that does that for us, so we don't have to backtrack and reactivate them correctly. Now here you'll see me kind of pausing a little to squish the Amiga balls. It does, you know, cost you some fuel, but that doesn't matter because we are so fast that that's just not going to be an issue at all. And I squished the Amiga balls again to increase the frame rate of the rest of the stage. And this is just totally fine, so a little bit of tricky movement, but it's really not that bad. Alright, so now I go to the right, and we're going into the 3rd subsection here. This one is very simple. Not a whole lot to it, just traverse the maze. Pick up all the flags. Alright, that activates the exit for us. So we just go and do it. And it's perfect. Pick up the gem, turn on the switches. Now we've got the 4th section here. This is awful. It's really hard to set up. We have some setups for this, but they're not nice, like, comfortable jumps like the ones in Misdirection. So there's kind of not a lot you can do. This diagonal traversal really is just awful. Managed to do a decent job there, but that is slightly misleading due to perspective. There's kind of an off by 1 error I had there. Alright, and now we've hit the final section of the game. There's this screen, and then 1 more set of 4 puzzles, of which we only play 2. Again, just the worst possible perspective. This is a little maze in which if you take the wrong path, you get sent back to the start of it. I did that in this run. I was so nervous knowing that I was on record pace. Quickly learned the error of my ways. Lost maybe like 40 seconds as a result. So we go down here. Pretty simple movement, nothing too crazy. And up. Take these little jumps. That's probably the first time I've ever missed that. And unfortunately it was on record pace, so Alright, now we've got these 4 platforms that you're supposed to land on the warp, and then after you played a substage, pick up the gem. Or the ball, or whatever you want to call it. So what we do here is something pretty wild. This first one, we just build up a ton of speed, land on the platform, and pick up the gem. It works well. This one is pretty much a pixel-perfect lineup. It's awful. So we break Gerald and pick up the gem at the same time. I missed it by, like, literally 1 or 2 pixels. And then I think I got it this time. And that skips playing a huge, really difficult, garbage sub-level. These 2 are not too bad. This one actually reminds me of a stage in the story mode of Monkey Ball 2. And I do wonder if some of that game was inspired from this game, because there are a couple stages that really make me think of something in Monkey Ball. The dots guide the path on your way down, and then on the way back up, you just have to memorize where the invisible paths are. There's a little nice diagonal movement we can do here. Everywhere else, not so much. Alright, now we've got 1 puzzle left, and luckily we can just skip most of it. We can't actually skip playing it, but we can just skip playing a good chunk of it. So you can see the exit from the start of the stage. So what we're going to do, and this is awful, it looks much easier than it is. It's very precise to not break Gerald and still clear the gap. What we're going to do here is just skip right over all of this and land on here. Then we'll use the single tile skip, which you have to pull off with pretty good precision there to have it work, to run out the exit. Now the last thing we've got to do is collect these 4 flags and wait for a 20-second auto-scroller. At the end of the game, you just kind of wait. You can move Gerald around so we don't stop timing. You can theoretically cause the game to lag at this point. But we don't, so. As the game says, well done. The planet is disintegrating. And with that, we're done. That's the game. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching. See you later.